The World Health Organization announced that due to the lack of security guarantees, it has had to suspend 4 humanitarian missions to Northern Gaza. In Argentina, the president Javier Milei stated that he will not negotiate anything regarding the decree of necessity and urgency issued by his office, bypassing the legislative process. And Brazil's National Congress has served as a canvas for an imposing celebration of democracy, a preview of the events that on Monday commemorate the first year of the coup attempt promoted by the extreme right. Hello, welcome from the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the TeleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. The World Health Organization announced that due to the lack of security guarantees, it has had to suspend 4 humanitarian missions to Northern Gaza. After confirming a new cancellation, the agency detailed that since December 26, they have not received guarantees of eliminations of security conflicts. The mission that was intended to deliver medical supplies for emergency operations for patients in 5 hospitals in that area of the enclave continues to await secure authorizations. They also warned that these medical supplies are the only alternative for hundreds of patients who are dying as a consequence of the genocidal operation carried out by Israel in the enclave. On Monday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Sunday that his government is facing a plague of leaks. In this sense, Netanyahu proposed that ministers who attend security meetings or receive briefings take a lie detector test. In this turn, Israeli media reported clashes between ministers and military officials during cabinet meeting last week over the post-Hamas era in Gaza following the ongoing Israeli war. Israeli occupational forces' air and ground attacks on Gaza since October 7th have killed at least 22,835 Palestinians and wounded 58,416. For his part, Israeli Prime Minister assured that his government will push for a law requiring all persons participating in cabinet and security discussions, including political and professional ranks, to undergo a lie detector test. The number of Palestinians killed in the last 24 hours rose to 113 as a result of the Israeli bombardment of Gaza. According to local media, some 12 minors were among the dead. The figures correspond to the bombardments launched over the weekend against the city of Khan Yunis in the south of Gaza. The media said the Israeli attacks against the center and south of Gaza take place after the occupation ordered the Palestinian population to move towards localities in these areas. The Palestinian Ministry of Health estimated the number of deaths since the beginning of the aggression against Gaza exceeds 22,835, while more than 58,000 have been wounded. Al Jazeera photojournalist Hamza al-Dadu, son of Al Jazeera Gaza bureau chief Wael al-Dadu, was killed during the Israeli attacks on Gaza. According to local media, Hamza al-Dadu was traveling by car with his colleague Mustafa Thuraya when a missile hit the vehicle, killing them both. The Al Jazeera television network has condemned this event and the constant murder of journalists in Gaza and said that with these actions, Israel is trying to intimidate the journalists and cover up the truth of the crimes committed by the occupation in Gaza. In Palestine, inhumane treatment and torture of Palestinians detained by Israeli armed forces is denounced. Several human rights organizations denounced that Palestinians detained by the Israeli military in Gaza are subjected to public humiliation and inhumane practices as soon as they are arrested in their homes. Likewise, humiliations include demeaning Palestinian groups and political figures, burning of skin with cigarette butts, torture with electric shocks, and beatings. A former Palestinian detainee revealed that most of the abductees are taken to Israeli army camps where they are kept without access to food and water for long periods of time. Many historical sites in the Gaza Strip have been destroyed by Israeli shelling. According to local media, occupation attacks have destroyed numerous archaeological and historical monuments and religious sites in the besieged Gaza Strip. Among the most notable monuments totally or partially destroyed are the Church of St. Porphyry, the third oldest church in the world and the only Greek Orthodox church in Gaza. The attacks have also damaged the Omari Mosque, the largest mosque in Gaza, as well as other famous religious and historical buildings. In this context, the Palestinian government confirmed their presentation of judicial testimonies for the theft of currency, gold, and antiquities by the occupation army after the beginning of the siege against the Gaza Strip. The report details that Israeli forces carry out confiscations at checkpoints, break into Palestinian homes evacuated after bombardments, and loot financial institutions. According to the Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor, the violent crimes of the Israeli army are compounded by the destruction of property, theft of personal effects, and the looting and burning of homes. The United Nations warned about the food crisis affecting the Palestinian population in Gaza. After more than 90 days of Israeli attacks, the United Nations Office for Humanitarian Affairs warned that inhabitants in Palestinian territory are facing unprecedented levels of food insecurity. The international organization added that this situation comes on top of a public health disaster due to the outbreak of infectious diseases. The UN added that Gaza has become uninhabitable due to Israeli attacks on medical centers and civilian buildings, and condemned the fact that the world stands by while Palestinians see their very existence threatened. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken arrived in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates as part of his latest Middle East tour, which will also include Israel and the occupied West Bank. This is Blinken's fourth visit to the Middle East since the Israel-Hamas war began last October 7th in a negotiating effort to prevent the conflict from threatening the wider region. Speaking at a press conference in Qatar, Blinken decreed the tragedy of civilian death, said Palestinians should not be forced out of Gaza, and expressed deep sorrow over the death of two Al Jazeera reporters over the weekend.
Palestinian civilians must be able to return home as soon as conditions allow. They cannot, they must not be pressed to leave Gaza. I am deeply, deeply sorry for the almost unimaginable loss suffered by your colleague, W.H.O. I'm a parent myself. I can't begin to imagine the horror that he's experienced, not once, but now twice. This is an unimaginable tragedy.
Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the South. The President of Argentina, Javier Milei, stated that he would not negotiate anything regarding the decree of necessity and urgency issued by his office bypassing the legislative process. Milei reproached the Congress, the opposition, and politicians and trade union organizations. He affirmed they do not want his laws because they want to continue with the corruption processes and social benefits. Described his norm as a liberation decree that focuses on more competitive markets, reiterated that it will not negotiate a single line of the decree of necessity and urgency, despite the fact that the courts have already suspended some of its parts. Brazil's National Congress has served as a canvas for an imposing celebration of democracy, a preview of the events that on Monday commemorate the first year of the coup attempt promoted by the extreme right. After the call made on Sunday by President Lula da Silva, the phrase "Democracy Unite Us" was projected over the Congress building. At 9:30 p.m. local time, the intervention began with the colors of the national flag under the slogan "Reaffirmation of Democracy." More than 500 guests will gather on Monday in the Esplanade of the Ministries in Brasilia, the capital of the country, to commemorate the most brutal attack on democracy promoted by the former president of the extreme right, Jair Bolsonaro. In Chile, the Supreme Court of Justice sentenced 10 retired military officers to 20 years in prison for burning 2 young men alive in 1986 during the dictatorship of Augusto Pinochet. The second criminal chamber of the Supreme Court rejected all the appeals presented by the lawyers of the accused former military personnel, authors of the aggravated homicide in the case of Rodrigo Rojas de Negri and the attempted homicide of Carmen Gloria Quintana. There were also lower sentences for 4 former conscripts accused of being accomplices and 2 other former members of the military as accessories. This case, known as the Quemados case, is one of the most significant of the last years of the Pinochet dictatorship, which left more than 3,200 victims. Paraguay's government decreed alert in view of dengue and COVID-19 circulation in the country. On Sunday, the Ministry of Health reported that the joint appearance of these diseases in the country has already claimed the life of at least 4 people and is spreading in different sectors, especially among children and teenagers. Therefore, the health entity calls on specialists to evaluate each of the diseases individually, as their combined action can be dangerous. Likewise, the authorities make a call to the sick people not to self-medicate and instead seek care at health centers and determine the origin of their illness, those qualifying the diseases as co-infection, co-circulation, and COVID-dengue. In Ecuador, President Daniel Noboa called an emergency meeting of his security cabinet on Sunday following the escape of the country's most dangerous drug trafficker and threats from criminal groups against the executive. The meeting was announced by Roberto Isurrieta, Secretary General of Communications of the Presidency, would be aimed at making decisions. The National Prosecutor's Office has reportedly launched an investigation into the escape of José Adolfo Macías, known as Fito, leader of the bloody gang known as Los Choneros. Previously, and after the announcements of exchanges in security matters, a criminal organization broadcast a video warning the president that Ecuador was not El Salvador. The agreements of the security enclave were not informed to the country. In this sense, 4 people were killed in a shooting in Ecuador's coastal region amid a growing wave of violence by criminal gangs in that nation. According to local media, the incident was reported in the city of Duran in the province of Guayas. The fatal victims were 3 women and 1 man, while a baby was wounded in the shooting. On the other hand, a bus was reportedly set on fire in the city of Guayaquil by a group of extortionists. Ecuador is experiencing the greatest insecurity crisis in its history, where murders, kidnappings, extortions, prison riots, and assaults are becoming more and more frequent. Also in Ecuador, members of the National Union of Educators called for a mobilization in rejection of President Daniel Noboa's proposal for a referendum. The teachers' union issued a statement in which they described the referendum as inconvenient, erratic, and unnecessary. They also announced that it would only lead to a waste of money in the midst of a fiscal crisis, while they consider that more than $50 million that will be used in such consultation, which they affirm can be made for legal reforms, could instead be invested in public policies and prevention plans so that children and young people are no longer recruited by criminal gangs. In this sense, they call for a day of nationwide demonstration to be held on January 18th in defense of life and security. Mexico's government granted legal status to the 32 migrants who were kidnapped in Tamaulipas on December 30th. Migration authorities will grant visitors cards and documents to the group of migrants for humanitarian reasons. These documents will allow them to reside and work legally in the country. Among the kidnapped migrants were Venezuelan, Honduran, and Colombian citizens who were traveling on a bus between Reynosa and Matamoros when they were intercepted by an armed commando. The mass kidnapping attracted media attention and was among the topics of Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador's morning briefings. We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience, you can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant new coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with TeleSUR. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back from the South. U.S. civil aviation authorities have suspended operations of Boeing 737 MAX 9 aircraft following a new incident. The suspension took place this Friday after a Boeing 737 MAX 9 with more than 170 passengers on board made an emergency landing at Portland Airport when a window exploded in mid-flight. The aircraft, operated by the national carrier Alaska Airlines, was flying from Oregon to California. Concerning this event, the authorities announced that all passengers escaped safely from the accident. The Federal Aviation Administration announced that it will issue a temporary stand-down order for certain Boeing 737 MAX 9 aircraft operated by U.S. airlines. In Japan, authorities confirmed on Monday that the death toll from the earthquake that struck western Japan on January 1st rose to 161. In this sense, a statement of the government of the central region of Ishikawa, where the epicenter of the 7.5 magnitude quake was located, added that the number of missing persons increased to 103. It is worth noting that the areas affected by the earthquake have been facing snowfall for the past 2 days, which has further complicated rescue operations. Meanwhile, thousands of rescuers from all over Japan have arrived to help those affected, despite the difficulties caused by road closures and some 1,000 landslides. A fire destroyed hundreds of shelters in several areas in southeast of Bangladesh on Sunday. According to local media, at least 2,500 people have been left homeless after the blaze broke out in the Rohingya refugee camp. The fire destroyed some 500 makeshift shelters before the intervention of the firefighters, who, after more than 3 hours of extinguishing work, managed to control the flames. No casualties have been reported so far. However, damage assessments continue. Hundreds of thousands of Rohingya refugees from Myanmar have been living in refugee camps in Bangladesh since August 2017 to escape violence and destruction of their homes and villages. Bangladesh election day ended with a low voter turnout. The elections were marked by violence and an opposition boycott. This Sunday, January 7th, the electoral authorities began to count the votes of parliamentary polls. Only 27.15% of registered voters went to the polls. On the other hand, authorities reported at least 18 incendiary attacks in the country since last Friday night, 10 of which were against polling stations. According to the authorities, one person died on Sunday, a supporter of the ruling Awami League, who was stabbed by members of a rival group in the Central District while trying to sabotage the elections. Orthodox Christians in Russia gather in churches to celebrate their Christmas festivities. This holiday, marked by fervent vigils and traditional ceremonies, has its origins in the centuries-old decision of the Orthodox to separate from the Catholic Church and follow a different calendar from the one used by most of the world today. The main Orthodox Christian service took place on January 6th, a day before the Orthodox Christmas Day, which is on January 7th. On the occasion of the celebration, the Russian President Vladimir Putin sent messages of congratulations and best wishes to his Orthodox compatriots, while highlighting the holiday as representative of the union of millions of people around the ideals of kindness, mercy, and justice. We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at TeleSURenglish.net. You can also join us on our social media on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.